And the game is always changing. The game of life is always changing. The game of football is always changing. You have to be able to adapt and evolve in it. It's all cyclical. It's all cycles. I think that it appears different, but it is the same. From one era to another, it feels a little bit different, but there's a lot of similarities. And I think that's where we're heading right now, in particular with the English game in the Premier League. Let's watch Anthony Gordon talk about why he feels, or what he feels the difference is between the Premier League and the Champions League.
Hi, good evening. Newcastle sit 9th on the Premier League table. You guys won 3 games on the bounce, 8 in the Champions League with automatic qualification secured. Could you run me through the difference between playing in the Premier League and in the Champions League?
I think in the Champions League, teams are much more open. They all try and play. It's less transitional. I think in the Premier League, it's become more physical than I've ever known it to be.
Yep.
It's like a basketball game sometimes. It's so relentless physically. There's not much control. It's a running game, and sometimes it's about duels. Who wins the duels wins the game, or moments. The Champions League is a bit more of an older style of game. It's a bit more football based. Like, teams come and try and play proper football. I think in the Premier League now you're seeing a lot more long throw-ins, set pieces. It's become a lot slower and a lot more set piece based, I would say.
It's interesting he talks about it's become a lot more duel based, and it's about who's winning the duels. And I said earlier about the game being a bit more physical in the Premier League. And I think when I look back to when I grew up at the age of 32 and what football was in England in the Premier League in the early 2000s, it's that Arsenal-Manchester United, it's that Keane and Patrick Vieira battle. Then the kind of Mourinho team comes in around 2004, 2005-ish. I even think of the Liverpool teams like Steven Gerrard in there in the mix. And they were very physical, hard kind of players that we a lot of times now say that we don't have in the game anymore, and that we want more in the game, and we want to see that. But the game's got so much quicker and it's evolved, and it's not really about those big tackles anymore. But I think what Anthony Gordon's alluding to there about duels is interesting, because again, I think it's physical from a point of view of just being very, very fast paced. And like, can you get there first and win that ball and nick it and go on the transition like he said? Where I think you definitely, if you watch the Champions League games, and I know from a Liverpool point of view, we're doing a lot better in that than we are the Premier League. It's slower. You've got a bit more time on the ball to build it up. It's not quite as transition-based as the Premier League is. And obviously everyone in the Champions League, are typically the top clubs. So they're going to come and play, and they're going to want to be on the front foot and look to go. They're not going to want to sit in necessarily and defend, because their fans aren't used to them doing that in their leagues. They're the teams that have the onus on them to go forwards. And yeah, there's been a big distinguishing difference between the two, and I found that very interesting from Anthony Gordon. And I think the Prem, for me, the cycle that it is in, and look, sometimes one season, it can be an anomaly, and then we can move forwards. But I think the Prem has almost gone back to that 2000 cycle of physical, strong, set piece type style of football, but just not in the same way it was in the 2000s, in a more, modern way, the 2026 version of that, right? Which again is just athleticism and a quicker pace game, and people are strong, but it's not like massive tackles. The Guillem Balagué had a very interesting tweet, and I'm going to read it out to you guys. It's a little long, so do bear with me. It was focused mainly on Arsenal, really, just with how people view Arsenal around Europe. And, a lot of people have criticised Arsenal for the style of play and how it's not enjoyable to watch at the moment, and how they would be, it would be shame on football if Arsenal win the Premier League. But it was interesting, Guillem Balagé's take from being someone out there in Europe, predominantly Spain, I'm pretty sure he is, and just how he's saying other teams across Europe are looking at Arsenal. So bear with me while I read this out to you guys, and then I'll give my thoughts at the end. Now that Arsenal fans are booing their own team and former players are lining up to criticise, let me offer the bigger picture, the one you hear across Europe. Arsenal are not seen here as a team that is stalled. They are seen as a reference point, as the team many look at when trying to understand where elite football is heading. The game has shifted. It is no longer enough to dominate the ball or to attack well. The top sides now compete in, and often decide matches through, the 4 phases that make teams excellent: organised attack, attack and transition, defensive transition, and structured defence. At the highest level, those phases matter more than possession percentages or aesthetic debates. This is where Arsenal stand out. Under Mikel Arteta, Arsenal control space, time, and another very important element, Rhythm. They are aggressive without being chaotic, but can create chaos to find gaps. They are compact without being passive. Their pressing is prepared in detail. Lose the ball and the reaction is immediate. The opponent is denied oxygen. Across Europe, this is understood as modern dominance. The key battleground today is transition. Not what you do with the ball, but what happens the instant you lose it. Defensive rhythm is overtaking offensive rhythm. Space is smaller and time is shorter. The teams that survive are the ones that arrive first. Win duels, plus reset order before danger appears. Arsenal do this as well as anyone. In Europe, Arsenal are seen as a team that has absorbed Guardiola's ideas and pushed them forward. They have strengthened them for a football world that now plays faster, presses harder, and it totally punishes hesitation. At the very moment Arsenal are being questioned at home, they are being analysed as a model. Progress is often uncomfortable and it rarely moves in straight lines. Arsenal don't look lost. In my eyes, they look early. Very, very interesting. And he's saying similar things to what Anthony Gordon said in his press conference that we just looked at, right? Teams that are get there first winning duels are very good on the transition. And yeah, I totally see that. The game is moved on and has been moving away in the last year or two from that possession-based style that we've seen Pep Guardiola come in and do. And I think everything comes to an end and we get tired of things and, you know, people emulate and copy. And I think that at some point someone breaks out with a different idea that's obviously taken from that idea that's been successful and they do their own thing with it. And I think Mikel Arteta could be the guy that is pushing that forward. And if it is, look, that's the way the game's going and we have to cop for it. And look, I want my team to play football that entertains me and gets me off my seat. And I don't think that you necessarily have to be boring to be this modern football team. I definitely don't think you are, and I don't think like Arsenal are particularly like really boring. They're definitely not great at picking the lock, I've said that, but they're not really boring. They do play for the set piece and they do play for the percentages, but it's just interesting where the game is heading, and I think that there's a lot of teams been caught off guard. And like I say, to kind of finish this video off, I really think it's in a weird way reverting back to that 2000 style, just in a bit of a modern way. And I think maybe even what Michael Carrick's doing at Manchester United in the two games that we've seen, kind of just going back to basics, being good on the transition, just energy, effort, win the ball. And again, the focus, what he said there is spot on, I think. It's not really so much about what you do on the ball now. It's about when you win it and can you go forwards on the transition and can you win those duels. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. I think it's a very interesting debate. I think the game's always changing and it's really cool to kind of think about and talk about. As always, like and subscribe to the channel. And until the next one, have a good one, all right? Peace.